on them. Some of the procedures are changing. So in the past, as I understand it, and Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't recall council ever approving police stuff or fire stuff for the procedures.
I don't know.
Okay, so looking at what we want it to be, I've got a proposal, and I'm just throwing it out like spaghetti on the wall to see what you guys think about it. If you want to do something different, totally fine. I only set 20 minutes for this. We have our regular or standing committee meetings at 6:10. And so I just wanted to take a few minutes to get a sense, and if we might need to have a second work session, just give you a chance to think about this. So what I sent in the packet was this document, this chart. There's a couple here if you'd like to look at them. But it's an idea of, based on what the Code of Ordinances say, and I'll use that too here. You pass these around. This just lists what the current ordinance states. So it's got the administrator, the guidance for the administrator for policies, and then I didn't even put myself here. So the administrator, it says that the administrator shall be directly responsible to the mayor and council for the development, administration, enforcement, and proper functioning of policies approved by the council. And it specifically lists personnel policies and administrative policies and procedures, as well as risk management policies. So those three types of policies are the only kind that are specifically listed in code that the council has to approve. And as far as I'm seeing the other ones, if you look down for FBO director, community development director, I just went into the code to see what it says for theirs, and all the language is identical for each of the directors. You can see for
city code or state code?
City code. And so for FBO director, it says, the director is responsible for the establishment of broad policies related to departmental conduct, procedures, and operations. So if you look at the other ones on the front and back, it says basically the same thing in every case. The director is responsible for the establishment of broad policies. So where I see it is how we want to go forward with this for who approves what is, in your mind, what it means under primary questions. What does it mean for directors to establish policies for their departments?
It means not to micromanage and let them do their jobs.
Yeah.
So let them micromanage their department, basically.
Right, instead of the mayor
Yeah.
or the council.
So in your mind, you might think differently from each other, but in your mind, does that mean that the council has to approve the final policies? Or is it good enough that, like, underneath each of these initial statements for public works, public safety director, there's an italicized part that every department in the city code says, all final authority for the administration and policy of the department shall be retained and exercised by the city council. So then looking at retained and exercised, what does that mean? It's squishy. It's squishy. So I don't have the right answer. I have a thought. But I want to see if you feel strongly one way or another of how it should be, and you want to just kind of talk about it. And that's why I want to do it in a work session, so it's really informal. So I'll turn it over for discussion.
I think it means that if the city council didn't approve something the director had as her broad policy, that the city is the final overriding decider.
Yeah.
Final authority rests with city council.
I agree.
Retained or exercised, you say rest with. It's a similar verbiage, I think. Rests with.
Yeah, I mean,
Resides with.
Easily argued on that. What that means in practice would be the same question for that language in 2 years. I guess, to me, I'm wondering, does that mean then that everything should come for approval? Because what happens when something's done in a policy that's developed without council's approval or awareness, and then they have this practice? What does it look like to intervene in an instance where they didn't instill that policy? Is this applicable?
How much minutia do you go into?
Right.
You say, I want to save the pop cans to buy 4th of July treats. That's a policy.
It's not a procedure, because you're not saying how to do the can saving. You're saying that you want to. Yeah, so at what level does it become too much in the
just
weeds?
take the police and fire stuff,
Mhm.
for example. I mean,
we all approved Mark Howard as police captain, or police chief. So, do I need to approve the policing standard operating guidelines? I don't personally think that it needs to come to me to approve, because who am I to say, yep, that's what I want our police. I'm not a police expert. That's why I had him. I mean,
What brought about that we need to make some big change?
Well, it's not just big change, it's clarification.
It will-
Because I don't know, with the standing operating procedures, when those are updated, and how far do you think you are from that, Chief Birdie?
Oh, I'd say for fire, really, we're there, and then for police, probably 2-3 weeks.
And can you guess how many policies those are offhand? Is it in the,
Remaining,
or a total that would have to come forward for review?
I'd say for police, probably 70 or 80, and fire, I'm not as sure of, I'd say maybe around 40, 50.
So over 100 policies would have to be reapproved. And if it's something that is a policy that's going forward to council approval, I would want to have those in the agenda listed separately, each policy, instead of saying approve new revised policies, because I don't want to have a giant blob that then you approve just all at once. If you have concerns about each one, I want to be able to pull out certain ones, and I think that works well. So you could potentially this year, if we don't clarify this of who does what, if we're going to keep allowing or have it set so the council isn't part of the SOPs, then you're going to see 100 or potentially 100 items in your agenda to have to approve individually. Where if it was just receive and file, like, okay, this is what the department's planning to do, receive and file updated policies for public safety, I think it might be appropriate to bring that to the standing committee for public safety to just have a chance to look through and ask questions. But when it gets to the point of the council meeting, I personally think it would work just to be a receive and file. And then if you have questions, or in the case, like in the memo I mentioned, like a marijuana policy from a couple of years ago that almost got passed, that the council wanted to not enforce marijuana laws, is how I understand it. And it failed. But that's one of those cases where there's a policy that staff have, or that the city has, that I believe is most appropriate. They weren't able to work out a deal sort of behind the scenes to change the policy, so the council just tried to override it, which is completely appropriate, because the council has the final authority.
Well, that scenario brings me to the point I made a note to myself, like, Craig, on various policies, you put them up against state and federal law first, I suppose, and then policy is not law, it's just operating procedure. It doesn't rise to the level of ordinance or a law.
Well, most of our city ordinances mirror state law, and so,
But policy is different than ordinance, right?
A little lower, typically.
Yeah, and the policies, we really started in the late 90s. We bought a sample policy from the International Association of Chiefs of Police. We wrote them all in like 98, 99. So really our policies reflect what national standards are in policing. And same with the fire policies.
So they haven't been updated for 23 years?
Oh, no, they absolutely have. And we're just doing a big review of them now. We're reformatting them, new font, new everything. And so that's why we're really going through all. And then now it's getting all new numbers too, both fire and police.
Yeah, and there's a couple of cases too where, like particularly with the NIMS, ICS stuff, the emergency management, it just was really outdated. So that, like, some policies are getting actually updated. It's not just a formatting change.
We try to update them probably within every 5 years, but we probably had some that were 7, 8, 9 years old that haven't been updated.
So when you get things like George Floyd, Black Lives Matter upheaval, that's when you start to look at the policy of how to handle different scenarios.
We took a look at some policies in 2020 as a result of that, dealing with like civil disturbances and things like that, so. Yep.
And that's a great example for the use of force policy, or what do we call it? The
Our force continuum.
force continuum. Yeah, so that was something that came to the council just as an update. I don't believe that the council approved or had to approve the continuum. It was just being aware in the public situation, this is what we're going to do going forward. If council had any concerns or objectives, they certainly bring it forward and say, I don't even think we should receive and file this. I want them to change this. But that certainly is acceptable. And I don't want to diminish at all the final authority the council has. Just don't want to micromanage the staff's work.
Sure. I think if I can speak out loud, I'm trying to see this from different angles that
Mhm.
any of our councilpersons might see this from. It comes down to a measure of trust, right? We are policymakers, and we want these things to be done by expert level folks that we've instilled into those positions, and so we should be able to trust them to do that work. The final authority here, how in practice does that shake out if you disagree? Let's take the marijuana
Mhm.
failure, for instance. How does that happen if you disagree with a policy? Does a council person simply refer to change that policy and override it? And how will they know about it? So there's a constant between approval and awareness.
Yeah.
So if we get the receive and file and we're all supposed to read it and we're aware of it, great. If it just gets done and put onto a shelf and we can't find it on the city website, that's a problem.
Right. In every case in this scenario, the proposal is that the council would have their eyes on it
Yeah.
as it's put forward
Mhm.
by staff, and nothing is changed in policies unless council's aware of it.
I think to Sue's question, my thought on this is some of the change to committees precipitated a little bit of this too, because we'll be able to collaborate much more closely without having to micromanage our
Mhm.
city staff. So I, as part of the public safety measure, will be aware of these SOGs and can maybe have my questions answered to advocate when we come to a discussion, if it comes to
Yeah.
a committee meeting, where those positions just weren't there before. And I don't know that we ever did the approval of these before. As you said, you weren't sure if these ever came before council for approval, did they?
No, because for one that comes to my mind would be the emergency operation guide that they did in the
Mhm.
floods of 2007.
Mhm.
I was mayor pro tem at the time, and it's like, didn't think I'd ever, it's like, oh, we have a whole plan for this, and it's the first time I'd read it, so, no, I don't think I'd ever approved the plan, because I'd never even seen it before.
Yeah.
And I read every single piece of paper given to me, so.
Mhm. Yeah, so in that case, like the EOP, for that column, we'd be looking at, in this proposal, the subject matter experts would develop it, the public safety director would review it, the administrator would be the approver for it, because it does impact all the departments. And in the case, like, this may change a bit, because there's some council role in this too. So if anytime there's a council, like a connection or some authority that's either there's no authority given to the council, because by state law, the council already has the authority. You're delegating it out. But if there's something that is removed, or in the case like the grievance procedure, how the potential is to take that away from admin committee, and so, boy, that's affecting council. That means it has to be a council policy. It has to be approved by council. And that would be a very...
Well, that's
Even
a
in this.
personnel policy, which has to be, right?
Right.
So,
But that one.
Well, it's in the union contracts, and that was
Well-
what the problem was when they wanted to change what
Yeah.
committee it went to. Well, it's already in the union contract, so you
Well,
can't
yeah.
just change it
what
without
I
changing the union
I
contract.
just meant that it's in our code that we would have to be approved by council, any personnel policies, and
We've
and-
always approved the personnel
Yeah.
policies every time there's been a change.
yeah,
And that's
that's by our city code.
Yeah, we always
So,
have.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Is
I
this
don't
the
know
first
why we
step
need
in
to make any
changing
change
this?
to that.
I don't think we are. I think we're just clarifying because
Well,
Yeah, there would be one change, like say for personnel policies, if you're just talking about, like you've seen what's in personnel policies. If there's something that we want to delegate that to the administrator to approve, and then like probably FBO committee would be the oversight of that, then that would have to change in the code. And just that part for city administrator where it says personnel policies, administrative policies, and risk management policies, that's the only thing that would have to be modified in code to delegate the approvals to the administrator. Everything else, it's just a understanding.
I don't know, though, I think I'm agreeing with, right, okay, I'm thinking out loud, so forgive me.
Sure, please.
So that, we would be because right now in this one, we are not going, if we agree on this, then we are not approving personnel policies and procedures.
Correct.
it would go
It would be
to.
the first step in changing that ordinance, to remove those
Right.
from our approval.
But I think that I have a concern with that, is
Mhm.
what I'm
Sure.
thinking in my head.
So if you think you should keep personnel policies, totally, yeah, that's fine. And that would then be, approval is the council.
Well, final approval.
Well,
As
what's the
opposed to-
difference?
Well, as opposed to work session or identifying a problem and then working through, staff works through it to figure out what to change and then bring that verbiage forward. Maybe with legal review by Kevin first, I was gonna ask you that too, because we say we abide by state and federal law. Kevin looks at some of this stuff just to give it a cursory.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Kevin actually drafts all of it. What'll ever happen is, a lot of times what you'll see in personnel policies, for instance, is, I think last time we added 2 new personnel policies that had never been there before, but that was because one of them was our insurance provider said, hey, these are policies that you need to have. So that's why they were there for council approval last time. Our legal folks look at all of that. Typically, what you'll see for personnel policies when they come forward, because of a situation or an update or that we bring forward. Personally, I think I like the fact that the council still approves all of those changes, because that way, as the staff is administering those, you know, there's never a question that that is a council policy. That's how that's administered.
And is that specifically for personnel policies only, or are you thinking of that for all policies? Or maybe like in admin
Right now, I'm
policies?
thinking in particular for personnel policies, for sure.
Okay.
I guess I'd like to see a list of exactly what is it you're trying to say you don't want the council to review anymore?
Oh, it's not that I don't want them to review it.
You want them to receive and file, you're trying to change some, I'm not following what you're trying to do as far as what you're trying to change. To be honest, I'm just not getting what you need as a big change here. The council should be the overall authority. Things should be approved by the council.
So
I'm not
Sure.
understanding what you're trying to actually purposely do here.
Okay, so in your mind then, should
The whole
Council
document, I mean, not even line by line,
should the council approve the SOGs for police and fire? Because they don't right now, should they? In the policies? That's what I'm asking about, and the emergency operations plan.
So
Council
when-
doesn't right now.
We're having a major overhaul
Yeah.
right now with those 2 in particular,
Mhm.
and it's not in there. So today, if we leave this alone, that would come and get done, would
Yeah.
come to us for approval. But should we have it?
Yeah, some will be sent your way, some won't,
Right.
and I want to make sure I'm not going
But
to
the
ruffle any
question, I
feathers.
guess, is, should we review and approve the SOGs? This answer is a potential solution of, no, we shouldn't. We should instill that trust in staff. Again, I've pointed out kind of both lenses to look at this from, and there's another potential solution, which is, yeah, we already include these 3 sets of policies, and for a protection for the administrator to say, hey, I didn't come up half-cocked with this and propose my own solutions. This is what the council wants done. The other solution would be to move all policies into council approval. So there's competing initiatives there, and I'm not sold on either way yet. I know we're pretty
Okay.
close to at time.
Yeah, and we didn't need an
Sure.
answer tonight, I just wanted to lay it out for what
Yeah.
my concern was.
Can I ask one question
Yeah, sure,
before we
sure.
leave this? Okay, so when did you say the last time the SOGs, when was the last
Ongoing.
time?
They're always ongoing, but
Okay.
we try and redo, or every 5 years, we try to review them.
Okay,
But we had a pretty significant overhaul now. so.
okay, so what happened in the past, like, when there are changes, the ongoing changes, does the council in the past do anything?
Well, no, I think, in my 20 years, we would, as a captain, we would make updates, we'd give them the chief got them reviewed by the city attorney always,
Okay,
then they would come back to us, and then they would be adopted and be in our policy.
yeah, and in my thought, I think I don't want to micromanage our staff at all, but I feel like my concern is, it's not so much, it is the voice of the council. It's not to take anything away from our staff, it's just almost an overlying layer of, I don't know.
Oversight.
Yes.
So why don't we come up with a list that we approve and a list that we kind of like
We received.
that we receive. What's receivable versus what's approvable. Policing, the SOGs, I would see more as a receive and possibly talk about at committee, but the personnel policies, I still kind of personally like as approval by,
Can we
you know.
come up with this as it stands today? So that we can
Sure.
see, here's
That's
what
a
we're
great
doing
idea.
today. Because we might wind up saying, we're cool with how it is today. It's operated fine for X amount of years. right?
Sure.
And we could clean that up and put that in policy exactly as it is today. I think if I'm not trying to
Yeah, that'd be cool.
insinuate anything, but this is something that is a passion of yours, is to make sure
Well,
that
just
there
make it
is
fair.
a library of how we operate as a government.
Mhm.
It's good, efficient government. So if we had this as, here's what we do today, are you good with that, or do you want a change? That would be.
Yeah, I'd like to
Sure,
see
go
that too. That would be cool.
Okay,
Sweet.
all right, thank you.
Question.
Oh, yes.
And might be more for Ron or Kevin if you'd be here, but our overall liability insurance to protect us as council, do they mandate or like to see this policy process and say, oh, you guys are so good, you're the only one in the state that does it, we're going to give you really cheap premium rates? Is that a thing?
I don't think they're.
I don't think.
I don't think
should.
They'll tell us,
there's a
hey, you
wellness
gotta
check.
do this.
Well, that,
Because if you don't, like the two policies that were in there, if you don't have those policies, your premium could go up. Cybersecurity,
They'll-
all of
yeah,
those kind
sure.
of things.
It's
But
a-
we've never heard, oh, we're gonna lower your premiums.
well,
Because I would say they never asked, does your council approve them?
Or
They
not-
just want to know whether we have a
not,
policy.
we won't raise it as much if you do.
Yes.
But then in the past, if there was some big thing that they wanted, we would have, you guys would do the work of what we needed, then we'd have a committee meeting where you would explain it to us. There was no action needed by the council, but you would explain what those changes were.
So that could be before a committee at this point, right?
That's what they've done in the past.
Perfect.
And then there's not a formal approval, right? It's just a review. It's like,
Depending
okay,
on
we're
the
okay, we're
policy,
ready.
yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
All right, cool. That helps. I'll get the, how we do today out to you.
I think we do another work session, or what are we doing?
Go ahead.
Nice.
To see some oversight by council on that as well. Not just administrative, for developing
That's what we
community.
talked Yeah, that's what we talked about. Like, I'll lay that out so that you can see and say, okay, we're gonna have that as council approval for sure.
Which column is that in?
It's
It's
not.
not. He said he was going to redo it.
We're gonna have another work session.
Yep.
Oh, I asked.
Something like that.
Are you
We
ready to go?
adjourn?
We're adjourned.
Okay.
I was thinking of